Welcome back to Environmental Ethics. I'm Tom, and today we are talking about Lynn White's paper, The Historical Roots of Our Ecological Crisis. This paper is less of a philosophy paper and more of a history of ideas paper, and it tries to trace back the origins of how we ended up in the ecological crisis that we are in, and gives some insights and connects this to anthropocentrism and Christianity in particular. So White's thesis is that really the roots of our crisis have to do with our technology at the behest of a kind of Christian anthropocentrism. Right? And so roughly the first step of his position is to notice that the advancement of technology and the sciences are really the main cause of the radical impacts we've had on the environment. And this is a pretty simple empirical claim. Certainly, if we were, left with rudimentary tools, hand tools and such, our impact on the environment would be pretty minimal. But what has made our impact on the environment more significant is the advancement of machinery and use of technology that allows us to do things like clear-cut forests and drill oil and build buildings and make concrete and so on and so forth, right? Without those things, we wouldn't have the need for so many materials, but also we wouldn't have the ability to get those materials. And so when White is talking about the use of technology, he goes back all the way to the invention of the plow and the ability to plow, acres and acres of land rather than having a small garden. And so he's thinking about this in a very broad term. So without technological advancement, we wouldn't be able to, create carbon emissions like we do. The second step here is that he noticed that our orientation in utilizing that technology and reshaping nature and using nature, natural resources, is really shaped by a kind of Christian anthropocentrism and a kind of pernicious Christian anthropocentrism. He thinks if we look back to the Bible and the way the Bible has been interpreted, we can see this streak where human beings are created by God in God's image, and nature is created for us. And so there is this kind of metaphysical distinction, bestowment, where nature is really a resource, right? It provides food, it provides shelter, it provides resources to make the stuff we need so that way we can live. And traces this back to Genesis, and he also looks at the Christian tradition through the medieval period and how it really dominated Western culture and the way we thought about nature. And he gives some examples of St. Francis and how he claimed to communicate with animals and was branded a heretic and all these kinds of things. There's lots of interesting historical details in the paper, but that is the general theme that he's got going on there. So with these two kind of claims, the idea is that our use of technology has been shaped by this ideology, this kind of anthropocentrism, that we continue to advance technology in order to use more and more of nature, and that there's not really any kind of internal mechanism for us, ideological mechanism, to prevent us from using nature more and more and more. Right? And so there are kind of two main insights from this that I think run counter to our contemporary narrative about environmentalism, which are worth pointing out. First is that science and technology are usually seen as pro-environmentalism, right? And for White to label them as the cause of our ecological crisis runs a little counter towards what we tend to think about, but if you think about it a little bit, it makes quite a bit of sense. So when we think about agriculture, infrastructure, research facilities, architecture, we tend to think about these on kind of the right side of the environmentalism debate. And even a lot of things that we do that are supposed to be pro-environmentalism actually use quite a bit of natural resources and are pretty a heavy burden on the environment. So a couple examples to think. Some people advocate for using public transportation. But of course, creating buses, light rails, subways, that's a very intensive process. It uses up quite a bit of resources. And although maybe in the long run it is better than everyone owning a car, it's still quite a bit of impact to the environment. Another example is a lot of people go paperless, as has been the case. People are streaming more and more, and people use cloud technology instead of exchanging papers, which is, uses less paper. But this requires the use of data centers, right? You need servers in order to upload all these things. And if you've ever been to a data center and seen these servers, it's a lot of technology in there. It needs to be cooled. And these are really big, right? And so there's a lot of energy that goes into using these things and keeping them online so that we have those to use. So also, another one is electric cars. We, mine lithium, use lithium batteries in those. They're difficult to dispose. They're very bad for the environment. And manufacturing electric cars, of course, is very resource-intensive activity. Another example is recycling. Recycling is a very intensive process that requires quite a bit of carbon emissions and so on and so forth. So, usually these kinds of things use universities and research facilities, for example, where we create the technology that we think is going to help with environmental problems. Those require a lot of resources. That runs counter to our narrative, and it's something to kind of question what we think about in terms of what grounds what is environmentally friendly and what is not. The second claim that he makes is that the institutions and practices of science and technology have adopted this kind of Christian anthropocentrism. Oftentimes the narrative is that science and technology is wielded by people who are not, at the beholden to religious ideals. But the kind of anthropocentrism he is describing runs a little deeper than merely the association with some kind of religious ideal. It's the idea that, if there are natural resources, we should use them, right? And it goes hand in hand with this advancement of technology that we always need to better human beings, better our quality of life. We should always kind of be using technology to do more and more things. And if you look at some of the major kind of spearheads in this area of technological advancement, we see something along these lines, right, where there's just kind of a default that human beings are entitled to continue to progress and that we shouldn't slow progress in the face of things like environmental concerns, right? Or these are kind of the two main claims here, and I think, or two main ways in which White's thesis, I think, should open our eyes a little bit and kind of re-question how we understand environmentalism and what is kind of the right side of this issue and the wrong side of this issue. And so it kind of starts a conversation a little bit. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.